So this next book, Jim,
Mm-hmm.
it's coming out quite soon. We're going to give the date, etc., and the cover I go through very shortly.
Right.
It's actually coming out a lot sooner than I think most people might realize, but that's quite good.
Yes.
It centers on a couple. It's hard to call them side characters because I think
Mm-hmm.
they play such a prominent role at various stages throughout the story. But
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always a bit wary of what can we really say about another book in a series.
Right.
This is your elevator
Exactly.
pitch again.
Yes. So, um, you can't really read the the description of the story without having a little bit of the first book spoiled for you
Mm-hmm.
because I tell you who the characters are.
Yes, indeed.
So if you're wondering if they survive or not, that will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm going to go ahead and assume you haven't read the first book and you don't want that spoiled.
Yep.
And I will say that it revolves around two of semi side characters in the first book who go on a separate adventure between books 1 and 2, and they kind of find themselves trapped with the enemy without knowing they're trapped with the enemy. And the story kind of evolves from there in a very dramatic irony kind of way where the reader knows what's going on, but the bad guys and the good guys don't know as much as the reader. So there's a tension kind of there that I explore, which is kind of fun.
It must be interesting to write a shorter novella when you've written. But I think we can all agree that Seventh Cadence is quite chunky. You know,
Yes.
I'm a chunky reader. I like chunky books because I don't like to be shortchanged in terms of development. So is it just a case of just taking a couple of characters out and telling their story as a through line to kind of make sure you have this the beginning, middle, and end of that story, or is there something else you have to plan in terms of writing or changing your writing style?
It is a little bit of a change, but not as much as you might think. The complicated part for me is I didn't want to change reader expectations much about what my style is, and that became difficult because going into writing this book, I wanted to make sure potentially it could be skippable.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want you to skip the book. I think it's a fantastic story to read, and it will definitely hold you over for a little while longer for the next book to be finished. But I wanted to make sure that the characters didn't do anything that became necessary information for the next book,
The next one.
just in case, partially because of how, a book 1.5 can get buried and not realize it exists. So I want to make sure that you could read the story or not read the story and it wouldn't change anything. That was tricky to do,
Yeah.
considering what I like to do in my stories of having a theme and having a character arc. Like, how do I write a story without the characters really changing much? How do I make that compelling if you don't need to know this part? Is it really worth writing if it could be skipped? So I had to grapple with that when writing it, and I think I I came to a conclusion of how to do that without destroying the style of how I want to tell the story. And in a way, it's almost an extended epilogue
Yeah.
of the first book because of that. Almost like, oh, this is how the story would have finished if, because of how everything overlapped, it didn't make sense to tack this on at the end. It just the pacing would have been completely off. So here it is, in its own separate unit. So
I like that idea because obviously with the multi-POV story, a natural end of book one is just the natural end of one POV, really, unless they all meet at the end and do all that kind of stuff. So when you have multi-POV, it does give you the opportunity to say, actually, they're still out in the wilderness, or they're still traveling out there, or they're sort of caught in the middle somewhere. So you get that opportunity to tie it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I really try to make sure it was something that was worth reading. And I think what makes it even more fun is that you get to dive into one of the characters a little bit more than you got in the first book,
Right.
to kind of understand them a bit more. I didn't over reveal because I also didn't want to take away from the second book's reveals of that character, but there are hints to it, to who that character is and why they behave the way that they do in the story. But overall, honestly, it was actually kind of a joy to write because it's so much simpler and so much, it's a much more intimate story because of the length and the scope of the story. It was kind of a joy to write because I got to focus on, honestly, these two characters are my favorite to write.
That's interesting.
Right. I just love being in one of their heads, being in their voice. I don't know why. I just enjoy it. Because it gives me Wheel of Time vibes,
right,
when I write from their perspective. And then I really enjoyed it because it gave me an opportunity to write more from the antagonist's viewpoint. So you kind of delve a little bit deeper, and they're not even, the antagonist is not the big bad antagonist. It's more like henchmen within the structure of the big bad antagonist,
but still threatening to our characters within the story.
Right, and you get to see, because there's a few of them, you get to see their perspective and how they're all different, and how they believe in what they're doing or not believe in what they're doing, and I get a chance to make the world deeper in this story and more intricate, and make the character, the factions more realized, and in a way that I couldn't really do in the big chunk of it. I mean, as long as it is, I couldn't do everything I wanted to do. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do that in this book.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll reveal the title. We'll reveal the cover.
Absolutely. So, Strangers in the Promised Land is the title.
Yep. The date's on screen as well.
Yeah. It's a fantastic little book. The cover was fun to make. I kind of put the cover together myself.
I was going to ask that. There seems to be, to me, a lot to ask about the cover, and about how you have put it together, and what's the symbols mean.
Right. So here's the thing. So the symbol itself. So I didn't make the symbol.
Okay.
All the symbols that I have are pre-made by another artist. But I put this symbol on here. It is actually the air cadence. Now, I don't talk about this in the books yet, but each cadence has a name that is more closely associated with an element.
Okay.
So the air cadence is a specific one of the cadences, and I can't remember which one is which off the top of my head for the number. But the seventh cadence specifically is, I believe, is the Calamity cadence, which lines up well with what happens at a certain part of the story. And
my brain was ticking over there. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, but I don't really mention that. It's kind of like a little bit of an Easter egg of what's going on. And so yeah, that's each. So these cadences are also in the seventh cadence as chapter headers, and so you see cadence 1 through 7 in the chapter headers of the first book. In this book, you only get one cadence throughout the whole story because it's just a very small, self-contained story. So you still get the chapter headers with that cadence. So that's how that bit gets played out in this novel. But yeah, I really loved doing this with the different cadences, and I don't to reveal a little bit more about them. So if you look, it has 6 different circles
Yeah.
around the cadence, and each cadence has 6 extensions, and that's what each of them symbolizes. So, when I talk about my sword forms in the 7th cadence, and I say, he fell into a second cadence with the 3rd extension, that's what each of them means.
Right. Strangers in the Promised Land.
Yeah.
It makes them feel like they're going somewhere special, Jim, without saying. That's
Yeah.
that's what it evokes.
So, if you have read the first book, for some of you, it might give you a clue about what's going on. And based off of how I describe from my pitch about what's going on, the strangers would allude to the people that these characters find themselves entangled with. And the Promised Land is basically the place that the bad guys want. And to not overcomplicate anything, the Desert Dominion, which is kind of like the enemy faction that most of our heroes are fighting against.
Yeah.
In the first book, they're wanting their land back. They were in a certain area, they got pushed out because people weren't getting along, and they want it back. Yeah. And it's been termed as the Promised Land to them. That's kind of how the title came together. Fun fact, again, I struggled with titling this. So I asked another book reviewer who I sent it to, the first person who read it after my wife, even before I got it edited, because I was like, I can't figure out what the title is. Can you read it? I know it's a mess right now, but can you read it and give me an idea? And she gave me the idea of Strangers in the Promised Land. I was like, that makes complete sense. That's actually exactly what this book is about. So I went with that. So
yeah, that's nice, because as you say, as soon as you publish the book, it becomes other people's, and they're going to take out of what they perceive out of it. So actually getting their viewpoint of something to encapsulate it,
right?
It's kind of nice, because you have thought about the progression of the story and all the mechanics that go in the middle of it.
Right.
So October the 24th, Jim,
exactly.
Coming out on Kindle, obviously. Paperback. Did you have a paperback advanced copy there that you had in your hand? Was it?
Yeah, I actually do have one right here. It is very thin, as you can see. It's a quick, easy read.
Nice.
I think it's like 103 pages.
Yeah.
I decided I wanted to make sure it was the exact same size as the 7th cadence, because it bothers me when there are in-between novels that aren't the same size. So I made sure that if you put it on your shelf, it will line up. And that actually made it a shorter page count, which was fine with me. It was a short story anyway. But I wanted it to line up beautifully, so I made sure to do that.
I'm not lying to you. If it didn't line up, I wasn't buying a physical copy. It was...
Yeah, it would bother me, so I decided to make sure it did line up. So
across. And let's say October 24th, is the paperback going to be October the 24th as well then?
Yes, so you can pre-order it right now if you want. If you go to emergentrealms.com and you can pre-order it from the website. There's a merch store there. There are 3 different pre-order packages. There's one where you can just get the paperback and the ebook copy, and that's the cheapest option. It's a great option because you get both. And I'm not allowed to sell the ebook copy after it goes live on Amazon because I'm in KDP and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So if you want it and you don't want to buy from Amazon, like some people don't like it, get it there now before it comes out, because then I have to take it down off the site because, I'll get a nasty gram from Amazon if they discover it there. So, but yeah, it's available there. And actually pretty soon I have to kind of update the graphics to show the book cover that you know for sure that you're getting the right thing. If you haven't read The Seventh Cadence yet, I also put a package there for both books, so that you can get both at the same time. So yeah, and it will also be up for pre-order on KDP, or not KDP, but the Kindle store pretty soon. So I will put that up as well.
Yeah. And as soon as that happens, I'll put all the links down in the description, etc. as well when that goes live, and update them as it goes live, just in case people miss it or otherwise.